So hello everybody. I apologize for the absence over the last couple of weeks, and that had to do with my family emergency. I really appreciated your best wishes and your positive energy, and it meant a lot to me. Instead of, I've been following the discussion online, and instead of responding to each of the points that were raised, what I will do today is I will raise 3 points that I would love for us to think about, or which are dealt with in the last 2 weeks, in particular the last 2 weeks reading. One is around the idea of nation. The second one is around the idea of nationalism, and the last one is around globalization and citizenship. As you know, one of the most complex and complicated ideas are around the idea of the nation. So when we think about the nation, exactly what do we mean by that? What is understood by the nation itself, and especially its relation to the state? So nation, as Homi Bhabha would argue, is a narrative, it's a narration, it's a story we tell ourselves. So Canada, for example, is not a geography, it's an idea, it's a story that we are telling ourselves. And this is why it's so complicated to understand the story itself, because it changes all the time. So in that sense, as Homi Bhabha's book would demonstrate, nation and narration are quite intertwined. They almost mean the same thing. And this is why Anderson's idea of imagined community becomes extremely important as we think about the idea of the nation and its different components. And one of the components of nation is the idea of nationalism, which is basically how we not only come to be, but how we narrate ourselves so strongly that it becomes that story that we tell ourselves. So there is no other stories. So when we talk about nationalism, it's basically we're talking about the strongest narrative, the strongest story that we are telling ourselves, which in many ways contradicts the idea of globalization, especially in its present moment. And if we link the second reading around globalization and Facebook, then the story gets even more complicated, because globalization, as the first reading would argue, it means McDonaldization, basically. And so in that sense, commercialization becomes quite a significant idea with globalization. It almost equals globalization. And that idea gets even more complicated by when you introduce something like Facebook, and when you introduce citizenship to the idea of Facebook. So then it becomes even more complicated, because if you take an example like the Arab Spring or Kony 2012, basically you're confronted by two stories. With Kony, you're confronted by the idea of what to do next, basically. Whereas the story of the Arab Spring gives us another dimension of Facebook, which is the active, participatory kind of citizenship that is aligning itself with Facebook and takes Facebook as a medium for participation. So those are the three main themes that I wanted us to take away from the reading, and I will have a lot more to say online, but I just wanted to give that summary to begin with, and then we'll take issues one by one in the online. Okay, so I will just stop there, and we'll continue my conversation with you online. Cheers, bye for now.